Hello everyone and welcome to episode 24 of my Orc Shaman level 1 through 60 playthrough, where we have the head of Onyxia that is spiked right there in Orgrimmar, but I'm going to leave that behind us because I want to go ahead and explore two brand new zones that I've not yet explored in this Let's Play series, and they are the Western and Eastern Plaguelands, where there's a little bit of a quick adventure that I want to go ahead and do on our way to those zones. So we'll take a quick detour, but then I want to go ahead and dive deep into those two zones, and I really want to explore a lot of the undead in the Western and Eastern Plaguelands by taking a look at Scholomance, the dungeon located in the Western Plaguelands, as well as Stratholme, the dungeon located in the Eastern Plaguelands. So let's go ahead and get towards the Eastern Kingdoms so we can begin exploring these two zones, which I think I said this a couple of episodes ago, but I genuinely mean it this time, where I believe this is the last time that we will be spending a lot of time in the Eastern Kingdoms, where we can see the Zeppelin coming in over the Bladefist Bay there, but it might be the last time that we are in the Eastern Kingdoms in this episode, unless I make my way back there like randomly at like a random point in the series, just to like turn in a quest or something. So this is kind of a big moment for us as we are approaching the end of this level 1 through 60 playthrough, where we can go ahead and do something that we have done multiple times across this Let's Play series, and that is fly into Terranmil and potentially fly into Terranmil for the last time, where we can go ahead and land and mount up, where I want to go ahead and just turn in a quest that I picked up in Orgrimmar from the Frostwolf Emissary, and that is to basically go to the entrance of Ottrag Valley, which is the third and final battleground in World of Warcraft that you can begin doing at level 60. At least I believe you can begin doing that at level 60. You might be able to do it even earlier since we have this quest actually, but I'm pretty sure it's 60. But I will be doing this in the future episode, but I just want to take a look at this entrance here in the Ottrag Mountains, where there are some different quests here that we can do, and we can go ahead and speak with War Master Legrand, and we can go ahead and turn in this quest in defense of Frostwolf, where we got some experience, which is nice, and we can do Proving Grounds, which will allow us to get a really cool trinket, and we can get the Peeling the Onion by Drekthar, who is a really cool character. But if we run into here, we can see this very fun cave where there are a bunch of more quests in here that we can do. So it's actually a really kind of like fun battleground with like a bunch of quests, and it's probably my favorite battleground in all of World of Warcraft, but unfortunately it is kind of ruined by the community, which is sad. But we can just continue running really far into this cave, and we can find the entrance right here where this leads into Ottrag Valley, and it looks like we could actually queue up for it right now. We're average wait time of 1 minute. That's good to know. A lot of people are still playing Ottrag Valley, but let's go ahead and run out this way because I'm not going to do that. I want to go ahead and explore the Plaguelands, and we will come and explore Ottrag Valley, where I'll queue into it from Orgrimmar probably in the future, but it's just a little bit of a fun excursion. So let's go ahead and get back to the Undercity. Now that I returned to the Undercity, I'm going to go ahead and run into the Royal Corridor, which is above the Apothecary, because I want to go ahead and meet up with Lady Sylvanas Windrunner, and that's the sewers. I don't know where I'm going. Because I want to meet up with Lady Sylvanas Windrunner, who is a character that I've talked a lot about in my Let's Play series, and I want to go ahead and basically pick up a very interesting quest. And this quest is kind of important for the entire story of World of Warcraft moving forward, up until right before the current expansion, which I guess is not current as I'm recording this, up until the Dragonflight expansion, where we have Lady Sylvanas Windrunner right here, the Banshee Queen, and we have the champion of the Banshee Queen, where we can go ahead and find a Nathanos Blightcaller, who is a really interesting character because he is a human ranger who was basically like trained by the High Elves and is one of the few human rangers out there, and he had some sort of connection with Sylvanas Windrunner when he was a ranger alongside her. But then when the Plague of Undeath hit both Lordaeron and Quothalos, as well as a couple of the other human kingdoms around here, we see both Sylvanas and Nathanos Blackcaller become undead, where they are both now Forsaken, where Sylvanas is the leader of the Forsaken, and Nathanos is an incredibly important Forsaken, who is decently important in the vanilla version of World of Warcraft. But moving forward into the history of World of Warcraft story with all the different expansions, we see Nathanos play a very important part in the story alongside Sylvanas in multiple different expansions, where he is basically kind of like her love interest, where it's not really like pushed like super hard on like the very like basic level of like seeing them do like romantic things, but it is like very obvious that they hold some sort of whatever capacity they can have for a romantic interest with each other, as they are both Forsaken. And he is, you know, from the perspective of a Forsaken, a very powerful and very good Forsaken, but from the perspective of basically everyone else in the world, he is a very, very, very horrible person. And we can go ahead and help him out with some stuff here in Classic WoW, as we kind of learned how horrible of a person he is as his story progresses in the future. But that's not really anything that I'm going to highlight any more in depth. And if you're interested in that, you could probably find some different Let's Play series or some different lore videos about future expansions to learn more about him. Which, if I remember, I'll go ahead and throw a link to a couple of cinematics that he is in future expansions down in the description if you're interested. Which I think is a little interesting to watch, because you can see his updated model in the future in those cinematics, and then soon enough we will see his old model. But in order to see his old model, we have to go ahead and get to the Eastern Plaguelands, where he is located all the way over here, where we need to go ahead and run through the Western Plaguelands, where there is quite a bit of stuff for us to explore in this area of the world, in both the Western and the Eastern Plaguelands. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and run through the two zones, unlock the flight path, and get to the inn in the Eastern Plaguelands, and then I'm going to go ahead and begin exploring these areas and exploring the dungeons as I do that. But I spent the ending of my last Let's Play series, my Human Mage Let's Play series, in the Eastern and Western Plaguelands, so if you want to watch that, I'll go ahead and link that down in the description as well. But running through the eastern end of Terrace Fogglades, where there's a very interesting thing going on right there with a couple of dead Alliance, but oh, this hunter is just farming the Alliance. That's very unfortunate. Oh, all of these Horde players are just farming those Alliance characters. That's very interesting. But we can go ahead and find the Bulwark right here, where we can turn in a call to arms, the Plaguelands, where we have a few different things. Let's go ahead and pick up our Argent Dawn commission, which is a trinket that is going to allow us to basically get a few different drops from the undead around here, known as Scourge Stones, and we can get like Invader Scourge Stones from like very low level Scourge, and then minions from like higher level, and corruptors from like the highest level scourges in these areas of the world, and we can go ahead and turn them in for some Argent Dawn reputation, where we can then unlock the Argent Quartermaster and a few various different rewards, where we have one quest over there, and we also have this quest here, which maybe I'll pick up the Scarlet Diversions quest, and I'll see about potentially doing that, so I'll go ahead and accept that. But let's go ahead and leave the Bulwark, and we can go ahead and run through this really cool entrance into the Western Plaguelands, where we can look at our map here, where there is a ton of different things around here. We got Chromie, and we got a few different characters, and I'll go ahead and just do various random things around here. But let's go ahead and get into the Eastern Plaguelands, where I think the Plaguelands is a very fun zone to run through if you are like a shaman or a druid character, because I kind of mentioned this a little bit when we were running through Silverpine Forest a long time ago, but with like the Lordaeron being all corrupted by the Scourge and whatnot, and being a land that is so wounded and damaged, it's kind of fun to just be through here as a druid or a shaman, because those two different classes are very in tune with nature and care a lot about like restoring the balance of nature, which is something that we see happening in the Eastern and Western Plaguelands, like with this quest down here, where there is a member of the Snaran Circle patrol that we can go ahead and help out with dealing with some of the diseased animals around here. And it's just very, very fun. And in the main area of the Eastern Plaguelands that we're heading to, there is a member of the Sonaran Circle and a member of the Earthen Ring that are basically like pretty big and important lore characters that we see pop up every now and then. And it's just fun to see them. And they are just a druid and a shaman trying to make this area of the road better, which I explored this area a lot recently in the Cataclysm expansion on my live streams, which I guess I'll go ahead and throw those down in the description as well if I remember. So I'm just throwing a lot of stuff in the description, but it's fun to see how this area advances in the story moving forward in World of Warcraft and the Cataclysm expansion, because we see that it is healed a lot in the span of the 6 years between vanilla World of Warcraft and Cataclysm. And it's interesting to think about how this area of the world will continue to heal as we continue to progress through World of Warcraft, because hypothetically one day we will see another world overhaul of the Eastern Kingdoms and of Kalimdor, and it'll be interesting to see them like overhaul this zone potentially in the next expansion after the War Within, where we are kind of heading back to Quothalos, and this area of the world might be in that expansion potentially. And it'll be interesting to see how this area has healed in what's going to be like 15 or 20 or 25 years like lore wise, but that is just to see in the future, where we are at the Thondroil River, where we can go ahead and cross this bridge and we can go ahead and enter the Eastern Plaguelands, which is a very, very fun zone. And we can go ahead and continue down the main road there, but I'm going to go ahead and come up this way because I want to take a detour to go ahead and talk to my favorite lore character in all of World of Warcraft, and one of my favorite lore characters in all of gaming and all of media. And this is a character that I talked about a long time ago when I was talking about Arthas, my favorite villain, and I was talking about Tyrion Fordring, my favorite hero, where we can go ahead and meet up with Tyrion Fordring over here, who is actually pretty fun to talk to as both an Alliance and a Horde character. But as a Horde character, we have been interacting with Eitrigg in Grommash Hold in Orgrimmar for a while now, and Eitrigg is a character who has a very deep and important connection with this character, Tyrion Fordring, where of course Tyrion Fordring was exiled because he freed Eitrigg from Stratholme prior to Arthas's events and actions in Stratholme that eventually led to the undead taking over this area of the world, but Eitrigg was saved from execution. And we can find Eitrigg in Grommash Hold, and we can talk to him as we have done, and we can find Tyrion Fordring right here with this horse Mirador, and we can go ahead and chat with him, where he is currently still in exile, but we have these 3 different quests that we can pick up, and I can go ahead and look at doing them as I progress through this area of the world. And of course we have a bunch of different map markers all around here, as well as some more quests. So let's go ahead and get back to the main road. But back on the road, we can go ahead and continue down this way, where I am having some flashbacks to the end of my Dwarf Paladin playthrough, where I was running through this area of the road as a challenge to end my character's life, and I died back there on the road because I was only level 20, and the enemies around here are like level 54 to level 60. But up here we can see on this hill that there is a house, and this is Nathanos Blightcaller's house. So we can go ahead and head up here to the Mayor's Stead, and we can go ahead and take a look at this undead right here, who we can go ahead and chat with. There's some Blighthounds around here, and we can go ahead and turn in this quest, and we'll have some more quests that we can pick up as well, which I'm not sure if I want to do any of these. Maybe I'll just pick this up. I could pick this one up as well, where I really like the Qualithian Lodge. And then I guess collect 7 pieces of living rot in under 10 minutes. I'll go ahead and not do that right now, but just a really, really cool area. And the Alliance actually have a quest to come here and kill him, and it requires like 20 people in order to do, because he is powerful. But canonically he does not die from that assault, and of course he continues forward, where he eventually dies in the future of World of Warcraft. But let's go ahead and get back to the road here. There's a slack-jawed ghoul right there, which is a dwarf-sized ghoul, which is very, very interesting. I think that is a Season of Discovery thing. But up ahead of us, we have a very dangerous area in the Eastern Plaguelands, and it is Corrin's Crossing. So we're going to be very careful of this area of the world, which is really fun. And it is a big human town that is controlled by the undead. So we're going to come off on the road this way, where we see some other players going around Corn's Crossing this way, and we're just going to avoid everything that we can. So we'll leave the undead over there, and then there's some plagued water elementals that way that we are going to ignore. And then we have a road here which leads to Tyr's Hand, which there is occasionally a group of very powerful Scarlet Crusaders that walk down that road, but I'm just going to go straight past the road, and there are some noxious plague bats right there that I'm going to ignore. And let's go ahead and just run through the wilderness here as best as I can. I'm trying to avoid everything. There's some gargoyles, there's some more plague bats, there's some carrion grubs who are not going to be too annoying for us. But let's just go ahead and do our best to survive in what is a very dangerous and corrupted area of the road. Where it's very interesting that a lot of the places that are like the highest level areas are like super corrupted. Like Felwood is corrupted, Winterspring is kind of corrupted, we have the Eastern and Western Plaguelands that is corrupted, and Silithus, which is a zone that we'll be heading to soon alongside Winterspring, is also corrupted in a variety of ways. But as we run around here and I don't fall into that pit, we can go ahead and see Light's Hope Chapel, our one location of sanctuary alongside Nathanos' house and kind of Tyrion's house here in the Eastern Plaguelands, where we have this quest right here. One of which is to go into Stratholme, and one is in the open road down here with the Torn Scroll, where we can kill Zeodar, the outcast. But we are here in the relative safety of Light's Hope Chapel, where we have an Orcish emissary right here, where we can pick up bolstering our defenses, which is a PvP quest to go ahead and capture all 4 of these towers around here, which I don't think really does anything, but if you control this tower, you can like fly down to this tower, and I think there's like a buff that people get if you control the towers. But we have unlocked this flight path, which I believe is the final flight path in the Eastern Kingdoms that we needed to unlock, which is really fun. But we have some quest right here that's asking a lot. Which quest is this? I'm not going to do that quest. But if we run, where's the person I was thinking of? Let's run over here where we have the Alliance Emissary, but we have some elite quests there, some elite quests there. We have the Defenders of Darrowshire, and I'm not going to be doing all these quests, but I can go ahead and pick them up, where we can go ahead and run into here. And that's why I couldn't find people, because in the Season of Discovery, we are currently in the patch where you do Molten Core and Blackroot Lair, which means Light's Hope Chapel doesn't have everything that we see at the end of Vanilla World Warcraft, because the final patch, or the final big content patch, which is going to be the final phase for the Season of Discovery, unless they add additional phases afterwards, is the Shadow of the Necropolis phase, where we can enter Naxxramas, which is flying over Stratholme. But there are a ton of characters that get added to Light's Hope Chapel during that phase and are basically permanent additions of the zone, where there's actually not an innkeeper here right now, but we got Max Tyrosus right there, and we have the Houses of Holy. So I suppose that is everything that we have to do right here. So we have a bunch of stuff in the Eastern Plaguelands and a bunch of stuff in the Western Plaguelands that we can do, and we won't be able to see Rumblat Earthshatter, the Tauren, who is a member of the Earthen Ring, or Rain, who is the Night Elf, who is a member of the Snarling Circle, and then a bunch of different Scarlet Crusade characters and Arch and Dawn characters that we can see in here. But now that I have all these quests, let's go ahead and begin exploring this area of the world, and I want to go ahead and talk about Scholomance and Strathholme as we do so. And class is now in session, and by that I mean let's go ahead and talk about Scholomance. Anyway, Scholomance is a vile academy for prospective necromancers of the Scourge. It is located in the ruins of the palatial House of Barov on a rise overlooking the abandoned city of Caerdaro, where Scholomance is the dungeon located in the Western Plaguelands, and it is kind of a really messed up dungeon. So basically, kind of like the overall story based off my own memory, and I could read the wiki page. But where's the fun in that is that basically Kiradero, which was the city on this island, and then we have the House of Barov, which is the massive fortress that we are working our way through, was owned by the Barov family, who also owned locations around Lordaeron, such as like Terran Mill and South Shore and Brill and like one other place. And there are two Barov family members kind of like left alive outside of the Scourge. One is an undead of the Horde and one is a human of the Alliance, and they're kind of like trying to get like people to help out with like this entire situation going on in here. Where Scholomance is really, really interesting because the Barov family basically sold themselves out to the Scourge for like power and like money and like, you know, control or whatever. But there's all these innocent people in Kiradero where the changes were slow, where there's suddenly like necromancers walking around the halls, and then there's like undead and whatnot, and like different servants and different citizens start going missing, where we learn a lot about like some really deep stories that go on in Scholomance that I won't go over, but you can read. But I remember reading like some of these stories related to some of the individuals who used to be servants in Scholomance who were killed by Krastanov the Butcher. And just reading those stories as a kid was like kind of haunting, because it might have been like one of the most intense stories that like I've ever read at like, you know, the age of 9 or whatever, when I stumbled upon this place and was like looking at these people and like reading everything. But Scholomance is basically like an academy for necromancers for the Scourge. So it's kind of like how Hogwarts is for like wizards, Scholomance is for necromancers. Or I guess if you want to be in universe, Delaran is for wizards. But there's just many cool bosses around here, where one of the first bosses you fight is Kurtonos the Herald, who is an undead who can transform into a gargoyle. Long ago, he became the master of Scolomancer's Dr. Theoden Krastanov, responsible for many of the atrocities during Krastanov's rule over Scholomance. Kurtonos fed on the blood of his innocent victims. To appease his master, Dr. Krastanov had to provide the gargoyle with more and more blood, where this is basically kind of like a vampire story going on in Scholomance, where this is basically a vampire, and you can see that he like flies around Kiradero and whatnot, and he like comes in when you like summon him, and then you can kill him. But I really like how you can like look out over across the water here, and I think just, you know, a random vampire storyline in Scholomance like makes a lot of sense, and it's a nice touch. But then we have two mini bosses, Vectus and Marduk Blackpool, where Vectus is just a skeletal mage mini-boss. But some people may recognize Marduk Blackpool because he was an infamous Death Knight of the Scourge. He was perhaps most notable for his involvement in the Battle of Darrowshire during the Third War, where he sealed the humans' defeat by corrupting the spirit of Joseph Redpath. Sometime thereafter, Marduk retreated to Scholomance, where he served as a tutor until he was finally slain by a group of adventurers. Where Marduk is a character that we learn about in the Eastern Plaguelands and a little bit in the Western Plaguelands, where we can just kind of like learn a little bit about him. And then we have Raz Frostwhisper, who's like one of the two main bosses in Scholomance, who this is an elite lich of the Scourge and overseer of everything that happened in Scholomance. He watched over and taught all those who rose to the position of Dark Master. He was a lieutenant and favored pupil of Kel'Thuzad. Ray was once a human mage from Stromgarde. He was a hedge mage, a rogue wizard that never received his formal training from Delaran. He was among the first to join the Cult of the Damned and quickly advanced through its ranks. He turned himself over to the Lich King when the Scourge invaded in return for immortality. Upon the ground in Stratholme, within the slaughterhouse, Raz Frostwhisper took a dagger to his own neck and cut from one side to the other, all the time with a smile upon his face. His corpse fell onto Menethil's gift, and it was there that the Lich King raised his fallen corpse as a lich, granting him immortality, while Leonid Bartholomew the Revered looked on. And then when we progress through the other side of Scholomance, there is a big area where there are 6 different rooms, and each of which have 6 bosses, where you have to kill all 6 of the bosses, as well as like all of the humanoid ads around here, in order to summon the final boss. So it's just a very boss-dense area, where the first one is Lord Keeper Polkilt, who is an elite zombie mini-boss found in Scholomance, and basically it's just like a zombie boss. Then we have Instructor Milicia, who's a high elf mini boss, where it's interesting to see a high elf here where she basically gave herself over to the Scourge, probably sometime around when Quel'Thalas was being burned by the Scourge and the Dead Scar was being formed. But then we have Dr. Theoden Krastanov, also known as the Butcher, who is an elite human in the Scholomance. Krastanov is the servant of Kurtonos the Herald, the main torturer and provider of bodies and bodily parts for the Scolomance's necromancy experiments, where his first victims were recruited from among the household of Caerdaro. Among them were servants of the Brav family, Eva and Lucian Sarkov. Trapped, tortured, and maimed for months, they vowed vengeance on Krastanov, even beyond the grave. Then we have Lady Elucia Brav, who is a ghost mini-boss, where she is the wife of Lord Alexei Brav. Then we have the Ravenian, or however you pronounce his name, who is just an elite white mini-boss that we find in this area of the world. So kind of similar to like the zombie boss earlier, just like a basic undead boss you fight. But then we have Lord Alexei Brav, who is an elite Death Knight boss, where Lord Alexei Brav is the Lord of Caerdaro, which was the other location that I was trying to remember, Brill, Terran Mill, and South Shore. He was the father of Alexei, Weldon, and Jandis Brav, and husband of Lady Elucia Brav. Like Jandis and Elucia, he is now an agent of the Scourge, found in Scholomance. And then the final boss of Scholomance, Dark Master Ganlean. He is not arguably the most difficult boss, nor is he the owner of it like Lord Alexei Brav. He is, however, the headmaster of the School of Necromancy at Caerdaro, appointed personally by Kel'Thuzad. Ganlean appears after the 6 bosses and all human mobs found in the 6 chambers around the headmaster's study are slain. And I think running through Scholomance is always a fun experience because it's always fun to kill a bunch of undead, and it's always fun to kill people like the Butcher and Dark Master Ganlean, who are just very, very evil people, and it's kind of cathartic to kill them. Plus, like, the Scourge is one of my favorite aspects of World of Warcraft, where there's just an enemy force that I love to fight. But as I was running out of Scholomance, there were 2 more bosses that I came across that I skipped earlier, where we have Jandis Brav, where she is just an ill-fated member of the Brav family. And then we have a slightly iconic boss, Radogor, who is an elite Bone Golem mini-boss, where he is directly under the Great Ossuary Plagued Hatchling Room near Jandis Brav's dungeon. And he just has a really cool model that I think a lot of people really recognize in World of Warcraft. And he's just kind of like a big boss in Scholomance, like way back in the day. But that is everything in Scholomance, where we can go ahead and transition over to Stratholme, where Stratholme is quite a bit bigger than Scholomance, where it was the northernmost and second most populous city of the Kingdom of Lordran, and is the city where the Order of the Silver Hand was founded. Today, Stratholme is the Scourge's capital in Lordaeron. The mad Prince Arthas ravaged Stratholme in the Third War, and the undead moved in soon after. Stratholme burns to this day, and its districts have been split between the overzealous Scarlet Crusade, led by Grand Crusader Dathrahand, and the Scourge forces led by the Death Knight, Baron Rivendare. Where Stratholme has 2 entrances and is basically like 2 different dungeons, where in the classic version of the game the entire dungeon is connected together, but in the modern version of the game you go in between like the 2 different entrances to get into like the 2 different halves of the dungeons, which are like 2 separate dungeons known as Stratholme Living and Stratholme Undead, where the Stratholme Undead version is basically kind of like the back entrance to Stratholme, where you can go in through the main entrance and start exploring a bunch of stuff. Where Stratholme is a really, really cool environment because it's a super dense city where there's like a lot of like city-like elements in it with like, you know, different shops and mailboxes and like, you know, somewhere where you would go to buy like a certain thing or to get like a certain service, and then there's like residential areas and like town halls and like churches and whatnot. So it's just a really, really cool environment, and all of that is just, you know, on fire and destroyed with a ton of undead around here. Where in the Stratholme Living side of the dungeon, in the classic versions of World of Warcraft, we see that there are a bunch of Scarlet Crusaders around here that are basically holding a bastion inside the city to fight against the Scourge and everyone else that comes in. But in Cataclysm, which is what you're seeing on your screen right now, once we get there you'll see that the Scarlet Crusaders are actually undead. But in the first part of the dungeon, we can just see like a ton of different random enemies where I fight some of them and then I don't fight some of them, where we got Skull, Ezra Grimm, Hearthsinger Forston, the Unforgiven, Postmaster Malone, which is not a reference to Post Malone and is kind of just like a funny coincidence where this is a reference to a basketball player, I believe. And then we also have Timmy the Cruel. But as we progress into the Scarlet Crusade area of the dungeon, we have a variety of different bosses. We have Commander Malor, who is basically just your classic like Scarlet Crusade soldier, where he wields a hammer and has like his classic red armor and whatnot. Then we have Cannon Master Willie, where this is a really interesting area because he has a bunch of cannons and you can pick up cannonballs to shoot at, I believe, ads that spawn during the fight, but I just kill him really quickly. But then we have Instructor Galford, who's kind of just like, your intellectual mage Scarlet Crusader in this area of the world, where he's really good at fire magic. Where we then have Seyden Dathrohand, who is a character I've talked a lot about in my different World of Warcraft Let's Play series, where he was one of the first 5 paladins of the Knights of the Silver Hand, along with Uther the Lightbringer, Trallian, Tyrion Fordring, and Gavin Rad the Dyer, where he was once a loyal knight of the Kingdom of Lordaeron who was chosen by Archbishop Alonzus Fowl to become one of the founding members of the Order of the Silver Hand. A hero of the Alliance of Lordaeron during the Second War, he became the Lord Commander of the Silver Hand and protected the lands of Lordaeron for years. When the Plague of Undeath began to spread, he fought the undead, and following the suspension of the order by Prince Arthas Menethil, he joined forces with High General Bindis and the priest Asilian to keep the fight against the Scourge. Following the scourging of Lordaeron and the murder of Uther the Lightbringer and King Tyrannus Menethil II, Seyden and Alexandros Mulgrain worked together to reform their ranks and their war against the Lich King. However, during a mission in the Burning Stratholme, he was captured and killed by the Dreadlord Balnazar, who possessed his body in order to manipulate the Order from within. Now a corpse doll serving the interests of the Burning Legion, his identity was used by the demon to form the Scarlet Crusade, a fanatical, corrupt, and extremist sect dedicated to the destruction of the undead and, after the manipulations of Balnazar, to the slaughter of anyone who opposes their doctrines. It was only after years of manipulation that Seyden's body was destroyed after adventurers pushed the Nathrezim to his limits in an attempt to eliminate him. Where we have a Balnazar, who is one of the 3 Nathrezim siblings left behind in Lordaeron to oversee the demonic conquest of that land. The return of Prince Arthas following the defeat of Archimonde sent the 3 brothers packing, but they quickly regrouped and concocted a new plan to destroy Arthas once and for all. Though they, and Sylvanas Windrunner, who attacked Arthas on her own terms, didn't destroy Arthas, the undead prince left Lordaeron, leaving Balnazar to rule the Plaguelands. Soon after, Sylvanas, who forcibly made Varmothras join her, laid siege to Balnazar's forces and ultimately forced Varmothras to execute Balnazar. However, the execution was faked, and Balnazar later came to possess the body of Seyden Dathrohan, a founder of the Scarlet Crusade. Where we then see him later on in the Legion expansion, where he is the main antagonist of the Paladin class Order campaign, which I think is kind of like a fun detail because he corrupted a bunch of Paladins in the earliest days of World of Warcraft. But Balnazar is a really cool character, and Seyden Dathrohan is a really cool character as well. And basically the combination of the two, where it's like the dead possessed Seyden Dathrohan, but really Balnazar serves as the first of the 2 main bosses in Stratholme, where this was the first half of the dungeon. And moving over to the second half, we have the undead half, where we can go ahead and enter from the service gate. And coming in through the gate, we have right off the bat Alonza's Chapel, which is a really cool area. But then we have Magistrate Bartholus, who was once the apprentice of the Lord Paladin Tyrion Fordring. When his mentor was exiled from the Order of the Silver Hand for defending the Orc Eitrig, Bartholus replaced Tyrion at the head of Hearthglen for a time, before becoming the Magistrate of Stratholme until the Third War. He was killed along with his people by Arthas Menethil during the Cooling of Stratholme. Where in the classic version of World of Warcraft, you just find him here at the chapel, but he runs further into the dungeon and Cataclysm, so you'll probably see me kill him in a moment. But in order to access like the final big area of Stratholme, we have to kill 3 different bosses in the area beforehand. We have Baroness Anastari, who is a baroness in life but was brutally murdered by the Scourge and is now under the control of the Lich King. And then I ran into a rare mob called Stone Spine, who's just a normal gargoyle that patrols around this area who you can slay. But then we have Nerubinkun, who is a Nerubian Crypt Fiend, and she is a mini-boss of Stratholme, where this is the second of the 3 bosses you have to kill in order to gain access to the Slaughterhouse. The third wish is Malachi the Pallid, who is a mortal human adept at frost and shadow magic, and just a basic member of the Cult of the Damned, where upon killing him, we can go ahead and enter the final area of Stratholme, where I can kill the magistrate on the way in here. Where the entrance to this massive building here is really interesting, where we have a ton of abominations that we can kill. And upon killing the abominations, we have a series of events that happen, where first is we have the second to last boss that spawns, Ramstein the Gorger, who is an elite abomination under the command of the Scourge, who is not particularly intelligent, but is just definitely very, very strong and just chaotic. Where Ramstein is actually the undead who killed the Ranger Lord Nathanos Maris, who is the character we talked a lot about earlier. But upon killing Ramstein, we then have a ton of just like random basic undead that go ahead and like swarm out of a nearby gate, and you have to kill all of them. And then upon killing them, the doors to the slaughterhouse will open, where a bunch of Blackguard sentries will appear, and then you have to kill them as well. Where we then have the final boss of the dungeon, Baron Titus Revendare, who is a powerful Death Knight in service of the Lich King, originally ruling over the city of Stratholme for the Scourge, where he then led the 4 horsemen of Naxxramas in place of High Lord Mulgrain, because High Lord Mulgrain was one of the 4 horsemen in the original vanilla version of Naxxramas, which I talked about several episodes ago now. But then with the events of Wrath Lich King, we see some stuff happen with High Lord Mulgrain, where then Baron Revendare replaces him, and in the Cataclysm version of the game, and starting like Wrath Lich King I believe, we have Aureus Revendare, who's the Lord of Stratholme, formerly a Paladin of the Silver Hand, where he is the son of Baron Revendare. And I think these are just 2 cool characters, especially the former Baron Revendare, who is really, really cool, who was a rich landowner in Stratholme who was convinced to join the Cult of the Damned. But these 2 bosses drop the Death Charger's Reins, where you can get Revendare's Death Charger, which is a relatively prestigious mount that is a rare drop that you can get, that a lot of people farm Stratholme over and over in order to get this drop. And it's basically kind of just like a generic skeletal warhorse that you can see undead characters riding around on. But it's kind of cool to see because like Alliance characters can't gain access to those like normal skeletal warhorses. So this is like the only way, in vanilla at least, where you could get a Death Charger as an Alliance player, and then it's just like another version of a Death Charger for Horde players that has some prestige behind it. And with that, we have completed Stratholme, where I completed both Scholomance and Strathholme here, which are 2 really, really cool dungeons, and the final dungeons that I have not yet showcased in any form on my YouTube channel in the vanilla version of World of Warcraft. Where next episode, I want to go ahead and talk about the final raids that I have not yet talked about from vanilla World of Warcraft in any shape or form on my channel. So hopefully you enjoyed that coming up in the next episode as well, where I just really wanted to highlight like all the different dungeons in World of Warcraft as we are going through the season of Discovery, because these episodes feel very similar to my Human Mage playthrough, even though I thought it was going to be different. So I kind of just wanted to throw these in there as well, because it's interesting content and it is nostalgic for me, and it is fun to run through these dungeons again and to explore them in some capacity. But with exploring those 2 dungeons, and with completing a lot of different quests and killing many, many different mobs across the Eastern and Western Plaguelands, and having gained a couple of levels, I'm going to go ahead and call this episode good here, where we are definitely approaching the end of this Let's Play series. And I hope you all enjoyed watching this episode of my Let's Play series, and I hope you all are taking good care of yourselves. Remember, as always, to drink some water, check your posture, and subscribe. And I'll see you all next time in the world of Azeroth. Goodbye.